In this video, we're going to take a look and talk about the full program question from the 2013 December exam. So let's start by taking a read. Write a program that will continually take inputs from the user of type double. The program should find the sum of all entered values. The program should stop taking inputs when a value equal to or less than 0 is entered. The program should not add the value used to stop taking inputs. The program should print out the sum of all values and prompt the user if they would like to play the program again. Things to remember. You can use the word and/or to represent Boolean operators. You can write and, you can write or, you don't have to write the symbols. Read the requirements of the program very carefully. Be sure you include everything. Make sure you're not doing too much. This is not the opportunity to impress me with some fancy programming. I really want you to do exactly what's asked here. Every now and then a student tries to add in an extra feature and they end up making a mistake in the process. I want you to do what's asked. If there is something you are unclear about, be sure to write down your assumptions and work from these. However, please read carefully as assumptions do not override expectations in the questions. So this is an exam setting. I'm not going to be there to clarify. State your assumptions. Read carefully. But don't state something like, I will assume the program prints out hello world, and then expect to get perfect. Okay? Read carefully. Your output does not have to exactly match the below code, but using it as a template will be helpful for you. So I give you some sample output below. You don't have to match it exactly, but take a look at it. It's going to be helpful. So if we come down here a little bit, let's take a look. So if I didn't understand how this program worked yet, what I was asking, I'd look at the example. So we can see that this run, it takes an input, 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 which is negative, which ends it. So we print out the total, asks you if you want to run the program again, no is entered, and it says thank you. Pretty straightforward. Same idea. Take some inputs. When a negative is entered, output the total. Ask if the user wants to run the program again. If they say yes, take some inputs, negative, terminate, print the total, program yes, take some inputs, 0, terminate, print the total, run the program no, and it ends. Again, this is just to give you an idea of what it will look like. I do not expect you to follow this exactly. So, the first thing I'm going to identify here is that I'm doing something a number of times, so that a loop is probably going to be useful in this case. So since the program has to ask the user at least once for them to input a number, and we notice that I don't know how many times the loop will run, the perfect choice here is a conditional loop, and specifically a do-while loop. I'm going to show you two solutions. I'll show you one done with a do-while, and another one done with a while. You could use a for loop here, but it's not going to be very useful. Remember, if you know exactly how many times the loop needs to run before it executes, a for loop is probably the better choice. Okay, let's take a look. So here is one possible solution, and this is using a do-while loop. So the first thing we do is we declare a double called num, we declare a double called sum, and we declare a char called again, and we set it to no. So, remember to use descriptive names for your variables. Remember to declare all your variables at the top. And if you write your program and you need to include another variable in here, it's okay to put an arrow and just declare another one, or put a number if you need to add a couple, and then put it down below somewhere. So you'll notice we have two do-while loops. Here's the first one, and then that pairs with this while down here. So this is the do-while that loops the entire program. This is the do-while that loops the inputs. So let's start and trace through this. We enter the do-while, come down, enter the next do-while, and we input a value. We take an input for num, and then we say sum is equal to sum plus none. So we add the input, and this is the end of our do-while. So we while num is greater than 0. So essentially, if the user enters something larger than 0, we're going to go back to the top. Remember, a do-while works that it enters the loop code, When it gets to the bottom, it checks the condition, and if the condition is true, it goes back to the top. So if I enter the number 1, adds 1, 1 is greater than 0, back to the top. 2, 2 is greater than 0, back to the top. 3, 3 is greater than 0, back to the top. 4, 4 is greater than 0, back to the top. Negative 99, negative 99 is not greater than 0, so we continue on. Now you'll notice what we do here is every time we input a number, we add it to sum. Make sure you do that after you take the input. But the problem is, that I don't want to actually include the negative value in that total. So the approach I've taken in my solution is I add every time I input a number into num, I add it. But as soon as I exit the loop, I subtract the most recent one I've entered. So I'm going to add the negative 99, and then I exit the loop, and then I subtract it. I print the total out, then I prompt the user if they want to play again. I take an input for again, and then I reinitialize sum to 0. This is really important. This is what a lot of students often forget. The reason why we have to reinitialize it to 0 is because if the user wants to play this again, so for example they say yes, I want to play again, and we see it's if again is equivalent to y or again is equivalent to capital Y, when we loop back to the top, notice up here sum is initialized to 0 before the do while loop. So we have to reinitialize sum, otherwise it will continue to add things on. And then we print out thanks. And that's the code. So let's take a look at what that would look like if I typed it into Eclipse really quickly. So, double num equals 0, double sum equals 0, char again equals n, scanner s equals new scanner, system.in. Remember, in an exam setting, you do not have to actually write the scanner object. It will be given to you. You don't ever have to worry about importing anything. So we open our first do, open our second, and we say system.out.println, input number. Actually, I like to do system.out.print. Num is equal to s.next double. And then I say sum is equal to sum plus num. And now this is the brace associated with my loop. Let's scroll this down a little bit. So I'm going to say while, and I'm going to say num is greater than 0. So as long as num is greater than 0, I want to loop around. And then once I've actually added the negative value, which I don't want to consider, so I have to then sum is equal to sum minus num to subtract it off again. And then I'm going to print out my total. And now I'm going to prompt the user for an input. Some space. Remember on your exam, I give you these lines. I actually provide you with this s.next.char at 0 for taking an input of a character. We reinitialize sum back to 0. This braces with this first larger do while. Something like this. So if we run this program now, input number 1, 2, 3. So 1 plus 2 plus 3 should be 6. Negative 99. Total is 6. Again, yes. 10, 11, 12, 13. I don't know, let's put a whole bunch in. And then we'll put a really big negative number. Worked again? No. Thank you, and there it is. One last point. What most students did when this was on the exam a couple years ago is this approach wasn't used by many students. What a lot of students did was they added an if statement here, and they did this. If num is greater than 0, then we add this. We only add the num if it's greater than 0. And that works perfectly fine as well. I hope this video helped.